Hello, and welcome to Totally Tech Tom. This is my Getting Started with Terraform series, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about variables and show you how they fit into your Terraform configurations. This follows on from a previous video that I did about resource blocks, and if you're new to Terraform, you should give that a watch. I've linked it up above and also in the description. Also, just stay tuned to the end because I'm going to just chuck in a nice little CLI command that's going to make your Terraform configuration files nicely formatted to follow the guidelines of the Terraform community. I thought I'd try something a little bit different this time, so let's switch over to the next screen. Okay, so variable definition. In Terraform, you can use what's known as an input variable to customize the values of your resource arguments. Things like the name or quantity of a resource, for example. They give you the ability to change the values of your resource arguments without the need to modify the code. And you define a variable similar to a resource using the keyword variable, followed by a unique identifier, in this case VPC CIDR. And to complete the block, you create a pair of curly braces. A variable can take optional arguments, depending on what you intend to use the variable for. And some common arguments include the type, which I'll go into a bit more detail shortly, a description, which I would recommend using actually on every variable to aid in documentation. You can also include a default, so that the variable does not need to be given during the runtime, and if no default is provided or one isn't present within your environment, Terraform will prompt for it during the plan or apply, which isn't really desirable, and it's not a good practice, especially if you want to automate your Terraform runs. To reference the variable in an argument, you need to use the var object, like this, and its identifier as the attribute. So, moving on, assigning values. To give a variable value, there are several ways you can do this, but my preferred way is always to use a TF-vars file, like this. The reason this is a better way, in my opinion, than others is because you can store these files in a GitHub repository and then share these values with others that contribute to the same project. There are different ways to load TF-vars files automatically as well. And so files named terraform.tf-vars are automatically loaded in at runtime. Similarly, files that are named with a wildcard, so there literally could be anything, .auto, as long as it's got that in the name, .tf-vars, are also auto-loaded during runtime. For files that you have a different name for, but you want to use them in the runtime, you can use an argument reference on the CLI -var file during plan or apply. So a little bit annoying. I've not actually included this in my presentation, so I'll just show you very quickly. We can do Terraform plan, for example, and then just do -var file equals some file dot tf-vars. And that'll be loaded during runtime. There are some other options as well, which is good to be aware of, but rarely used in my opinion, since it will likely become difficult to manage when working in a team. And they are environment variables. These are variables that are prefixed with uppercase tf_var_. To give you an example, you would do an export, or however you define an environment variable in your operating system, tf_var_, and then VPC CIDR in this case. You can also use the -var argument on the CLI as well during plan or apply, which is similar to how you did the -var file as I showed you before. I will demonstrate these very shortly anyway, so we'll just move on. Okay, well, thanks for sticking around so far. This is the last slide, I promise. So before showing you any code, I want to quickly give you an overview of the different type constraints used in Terraform. So Terraform has three main types you can use for variables. There's string, a value which is contained within two quotation marks, and it's for providing variables such as AMI IDs, descriptions, IP addresses, basically not a number. And so then you have numbers, which are for real, actual numbers, full numbers. This can take integer numbers like 180 or floating point numbers like 1.21. Lastly, we have the bool or boolean. This is for giving you the ability to put true or false values. I mean, if you're familiar with other programming languages, you're probably quite familiar with this kind of concept. So we'll move on. Okie dokie. So like always, let's finish off by giving an example of how this all fits together. I'm going to go through the Terraform that we've been working on, which is stored in my GitHub repository. If you want to have a quick reference within that, link is in the description. In this particular example, we're going to variabilize it using what I've been talking about. So let's create a new file called variables. This is a Terraform standard practice using a file called variables to store all your variables definitions within. I'm going to variabilize this value right here. I'm going to create a variable called tutorial instance type. Let's open that up. I'm going to give it a description. And like I said, that will be like your documentation. So the type of instance to start the tutorial instance with. Okay. And we're going to give that a type of string. Now I'm going to create another file called terraform.tfvars. If you remember, that one's auto-loaded. And inside that, I'm going to create the tutorial instance type. I'm going to give it a value t2.micro. This matches the current argument. Lastly, we need to reference that. So if we head over into EC2 and we change that to var, tutorial instance type, like so. Now, when we run a plan, head over here, Terraform plan, then we get no changes, which is expected. Okay, so just to show you what happens when no value is provided. And now Terraform will prompt for that value. So to demonstrate the other methods, as I mentioned before, I'm going to create an environment variable called tf_var_ tutorial instance type equals, and I'm going to give it something different, t2.medium. And if we run a plan now, you can see it's trying to change it to that t2 medium instance type as opposed to t2 micro. Of course, we can also use Terraform plan and instead do -var equals tutorial instance type equals t2.large. Hey, there we go. We've got a t2 large now trying to get in. What's interesting here is that the environment variable is still defined. You may have come across this with other programming languages and SDKs, but there is an order of precedence when defining variables. -var on the CLI overrides everything, followed by the tfvars file, which we've created. And then the environment variable is right at the bottom of the list. Useful to remember if you're troubleshooting. So we can see that if we reassign this variable again, if we try and do a plan now again with the var assigned on the CLI, it still tries to run the plan and tries to change it to a t2.large. If we just do Terraform plan, it's now honoring the value that I've provided via the tfvars file, which is actually what's already set, so no changes. So we can unset tf_env underscore, wait. Yeah, that. Let's just get rid of that. So, to avoid confusion. So anyway, I like to give certain variables a default value. This is useful because then you would only have to state the differences, things that you want to change inside your configurations. This probably becomes more relevant when you're actually writing modules, which I'll cover in another video. But let's start as we mean to go on, and I think an instance type should have a default value of T2 micro. So we'll give it a default equals T2.micro, like so. And just something else I like to do is, as part of the description, is if it's got a default value, then I'll just write default T2.micro because it's good for your documentation. Okay, and now we don't even need to include this because we've got our default. So this time I'm going to define a new variable called tutorial AMI ID. Very similar again. Got a description. The AMI ID to use for the tutorial instance. Oops. And that's going to be a string as well. And in this case, I don't think this makes sense to have a default variable because an AMI ID will change and you're always probably going to be overriding it. However, there are better ways than just defining it as a variable, such as a data source. Again, something that's going to come up very soon. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing, and we're going to change that to a var tutorial AMI ID, like so. And then let's provide the AMI tutorial AMI ID and paste that there, like so. Always do a plan, just to check you've not broke anything. Fine. So another thing that variables can do is to help you keep common values like names and environments, like the environment name, defined in one place, whilst the variables can be reused many times throughout the configuration. That way, if you're deploying to a new environment or you need to change the name of something that spans many resources, you can just do it once and it actually affects everything. It cascades down through everything. And to give an example of that, I'm just going to create a new variable called environment. And description, as always, the environment, if I can spell it right, environment to deploy the tutorial infrastructure to. Going to be a type of string. I'm going to give environment. I'm going to give that a value of tutorial because, you know, why not? And now I'm going to apply this environment equals var.environment. I'm going to apply this to every single tag now within our project. Yeah. Let's do Terraform apply. Okay. Now, let's have a look here just quickly. For example, all our resources now have this environment tutorial tag assigned to them. Now then, What if we wanted to change that? Well, if we wanted to change that to development, we'd have to do that all again in every single tag. But actually, no, we don't. We can just run apply now, and there you go. It's changing everything. Shall we run it? Sure, why not? Ta-da. Now, for one last example, string interpolation. String interpolation is something you'll use quite often, so it's very useful. I'm gonna create a new variable called name. I'm gonna give it a description. The name of the tutorial infrastructure, yeah. And then this is also a string. Okay. Name equals tutorial. Wow. Groundbreaking. So just to do the var name thing, and we can just quickly replace these name tags with var.name. Since there's not that many, it's not a huge problem. Let's leave this one for now though, shall we? Public tutorial. We'll just change the ones that don't have that. But what we do here is we change to do string interpolation. We within the quotes we do a $, open curly braces, and then a close curly braces, and then we do the reference to the variable like so. I'm just going to take a copy of that and I'm going to place it over this one as well. Yeah, so whatever, you can do it on either side, so I can add something else here like that, and that's fine. It just interpolates the value of var.name in line with the rest of this string. So if we do a plan now, the only change that we should see is actually on that subnet tutorial, we'll get and it's trying to change that to add that something else at the end. We've got public tutorial, something else, like so. Yeah. Okay, so for some bonus material, a nice little CLI command that's going to make all of your Terraform configuration nice and clean and following best practices. So as we've been writing code, I've not been paying that much attention and care to the actual white space. And in Terraform, there's a few best practices in white space, such as equal signs should all line up, especially when it's variables, arguments are on top of each other. And to quickly fix that, once you've written your code, just run Terraform format like so, hit enter, and now it'll go off, it'll run through all the files within that root module and add and change them. As you can see now, we've now got nicely spaced equal signs that stack on top of each other the way they're supposed to. So you don't really have to pay too much attention to how you write your code, get it working, then run Terraform format, and then jobs are good. Okay, so that covers what I wanted to show you today. As always, let's run a Terraform destroy, because we've got an EC2 instance out there and we don't want that costing us any money. So, thanks for watching. If you're enjoying my videos, please support my channel by subscribing and giving me a like. It'll help the algorithm do its thing. And if you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section below and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Don't forget, I've got a GitHub repo that's tracking all the changes that I'm making in these videos, so you can follow along. I'll leave the link below in the description. I think my next major release will be on data sources, which can help find values inside our providers, like AWS, for instance, instead of using input variables. So stay tuned, and until next time, happy coding.